This program is funded in part by the following.
May 16, 2025, a date all too familiar with the St. Louis region. In a matter of minutes, a quiet day turned violent. Walls folded, trees twisted, and entire blocks of St. Louis were forever changed.
Everything is gone.
You lose a lot of the power and things you worked really hard for in a moment.
At that time, I really thought that it was going to be my last moment.
You want to make sure people are physically safe, but mentally it does something to you also.
These are family houses. These are there's stories attached, not just for a year or two. This is decades and decades worth of devastation.
Here's what we know about the EF3 tornado that ripped through our city. Wind speeds reached 152 miles per hour. The storm stayed on the ground for over 25 miles. More than 5,000 homes and buildings were damaged or destroyed. Up to 5 people lost their lives. Dozens were injured, thousands displaced, and the estimated damage, $1.6 billion. These aren't just numbers. These are lives, interrupted, upended, and in many cases, left waiting for insurance, waiting for rebuilds, waiting to be heard. Because after the debris is cleared and the headlines fade, the hardest questions remain. Why did some neighborhoods get warnings and others did not? What happens to renters, to elders, to families without coverage? Are we building back stronger or just faster? How do we ensure longtime residents can rebuild?
For us, making sure the north side stays whole and is able to equitably and responsibly be rebuilt, that will be the end. We're in this for the long term, and we won't step away. We'll make sure our people are taken care of.
What happens next? And who gets to decide?
PBS Tornado Town Hall. Your voice, our future. I'm Carol Daniel. This special is being filmed on the basketball court of the O'Fallon Recreation Complex and YMCA, which also became the People's Response Hub immediately following the May 16th tornado. For tonight's program, we've gathered those affected by the deadly storm, as well as recovery activists and St. Louis leaders. We're meeting here tonight in the heart of the tornado's path, but not to come up with concrete solutions. Clearly, that could take years. But we gather to grieve, to speak openly with each other, and to find hope in the aftermath of the deadly storm. St. Louis's history is full of divides, but in times like this, we do believe it's essential that we see one another and try to come together. Over 5,000 St. Louis homes and buildings were either damaged or destroyed by the May 16th tornado. Linda Granberry-Shelton was inside her home that day and experienced the EF3 tornado firsthand. In July, on the sidewalk in front of her home, she shared her experience with me.
I was sitting there in my family room when all of this heavy wind started, didn't hear any sirens or alarms or anything like that. I was sitting there on my sofa when the front of my home collapsed. What I did was hollered out to my family members who were upstairs, and in the kitchen I hollered out to them to let's get to the basement because there was something happening. And before we could go to the basement, the back of my home collapsed. And then the side of my home collapsed. It was very, very frightening. And we all gathered up in the front of the home on the north side, and then it happened so quickly. There were people walking up and down the street hollering to see if anybody was in the home. And right here to the north is where we got out. But we were standing there waiting for someone to rescue us when we saw Miss Dolores Holmes in this home across the street. Her home collapsed on her, and they had brought her out in the yard and was giving her CPR. Dolores Holmes, she was so sweet. Always working in her yard. I have good days and I have bad days because it was very traumatic. Someone broke into the home. They were living in my basement. There were men clothing and shoes down there. Had made a bed in one of my sofas. I had 4 sofas down there, a big pool table. We did a lot of entertainment down there. And so where they tried to steal my washer and dryer, but they could not get it out because I have a security door plus an old style wash tub. And then all the debris from the home had fallen behind there, and they couldn't get it up the steps because they were too narrow. I want to rebuild, and I put $100,000 in my home, replacing 55 windows, all steel doors, brand new heating and cooling system. I took a pride in keeping my home beautiful, and that's what I worked 44 years for as a manager at AT&T. I wanted to live here because I love the Ville. I love the Greater Ville. It's a historic Black area. And my oldest daughter attended Sumner High School. And it's a historic Black high school. And that's why I wanted to stay here in this neighborhood. Board of Aldermen, state representatives, the senators, FEMA, everybody. We need your help in North St. Louis. Come over here, you'll see the damage and how it has destroyed lives. And me, I want to start over right here. I want to start over right here.
Linda is with us tonight. She always looks this fabulous every day. Do not doubt it. Linda, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you. Many audience members with us tonight are also survivors of the storm or had their homes or property destroyed. Paula Vickers came back from a vacation to find her North St. Louis home was hit by the tornado. Paula, can you tell us how you found out that your home was destroyed and the experience you had when you first saw your house?
Yeah, so I had the best day of my life in Italy. Got back to my hotel, and when my phone connected to the Wi-Fi, I think it was about 11:30 in Italy, so 3:30 in St. Louis. Everyone that I know was like FaceTiming me, FaceTime audio, messaging me like, "Are you okay?" And I couldn't imagine what had happened, so I went to my doorbell camera, and it said it was offline. And so I'm like, what has happened in St. Louis that people are concerned about me? I reached out to my aunt, and she had basically told everyone to not tell me anything. And she put up a firewall between my friends and I because she knew there was nothing I could do. So I had 2 more days in Italy, really not knowing what had happened. She said there was some damage to your house, and that was just it. And she said, I'm working on it. I got back, and the next day I went to my neighborhood, and I couldn't drive down my neighborhood. I had to park blocks away and walk into my neighborhood. And someone had told me to put on boots, and I thought that was a ridiculous thing to say. So I put on boots, and driving up into my neighborhood, I'm on Ashland. The route that I took, it wasn't terrible until I got really, really close. And I really didn't process the enormity of a tornado hitting North City because this home has been in my family for 70 years. It's housed 4 generations of my family. I just feel like the neighborhood was untouchable. And so when I got there, I literally became physically ill to the point that I couldn't stand. I couldn't even process what had happened. My aunt had sent someone with me, and they were just get her out, we'll handle it. But yeah, I still really don't think I've processed what happened. Even talking to people today, they're like, how are things and how's your house? And it's well, my house has been worked on, but my neighborhood is gone. So how do you answer how you are when a piece of the puzzle is complete, but like the whole picture isn't there.
And so, thank you so much, Paula. Bettie Taylor is right next to you, and her daycare was damaged in the tornado.
Yes, on May the 16th, 2025, me and my children were in my home. I had 3 children left, and we were in the place where the tornado hit. But before, there weren't any sirens. The only thing I heard was take shelter. I'm so grateful that I took shelter at least and got my children downstairs. And as soon as I got the basement door closed, I knew something had happened really bad, but I didn't know what. And I just think, I'm gonna say I thank and praise God for those children and in my life. I thank and praise God because that building that fell over into my building, I believe that I tried to get that building down for years. I got every name of every person I talked to, the year, the time, the month, the complaint number over the years. And I taped them on my phone. And I told them, I said, you know what, you really need to do something about this building, because it's going to, if a strong wind comes, it's going to fall. And never knowing that
this would be the strong
wind.
Are you able to, do you want to rebuild is the question, and can
I
you?
want to rebuild, and I am. My insurance company is helping me to do that. They're giving me 6 to 8 months, maybe, or more, but they have been wonderful. They are helping me to rebuild. I'm grateful, I'm honored. My parents are calling saying, oh, Miss Bettie, when are you going to open? I am one of the 24-hour daycares as well. So there aren't many of those in the city of St. Louis.
And they are necessary.
They are very necessary.
Thank you so much. And you own a daycare, Cicely Hunter, who you may recognize her face. She is a public historian with the Missouri Historical Society, and we have a partnership with MOHIS, as we call it. And she has done a variety of Black History Month vignettes on the podcast Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel. Bettie owns a daycare. Cicely's twins were in their daycare and when that building was hit by a tornado. How difficult was it for you and your husband to even get to them?
Thank you, Carol. Yes, it was very difficult for us to actually get to our children with trees down. We had to redirect into the neighborhoods. You know, a lot of the streets are kind of cut off. And so we found our way to our children, and just completely devastating in the area in which they were in. The lights were off. It was a haze in the space. Kids were screaming. I ran to the daycare director and was just in a panic. And he said, everything is okay. And I said, you are not okay. And I grabbed my kids and we ran back to our vehicle and tried to reroute out of the neighborhood.
You've told me some weeks ago that they weren't physically injured, but your son had nightmares. And does he still have them? Is he better now?
I think he's better now, but I didn't put the 2 and 2 together. It took for me to have a conversation with my mom, and she reminded me, Cicely, you just came out of a tornado. You don't know what those kids was going through. And thankfully, the daycare teacher told me that she actually was told to go in a certain area, and she felt it in her spirit not to go into that area. And thankfully she didn't, because that's where the ceiling had actually caved in. So I do give God glory for that, for sure.
Thank you. St. Louis Fire Chief Dennis Jenkerson is with us, and I have interviewed him for 30 years about a variety of topics. As I was navigating out of the tornado and seeing the smashed cars and the twisted buildings and the trees that didn't look like trees anymore, I've never seen so many firefighters and fire trucks in my life. What was that day like for you? And then we must talk about the siren issue. What was the day like for you first?
Well, the day actually started off nice. It was good weather, sunny skies. We knew that there was a possibility of impending storms. When the tornado actually hit, We were already moving equipment around, if you will. Everybody's talking about the ability to get into the neighborhoods. That was the first priority of the fire department. We couldn't get in either, so everything had to be cleared. We had 50 recruits that were stationed at headquarters that were all moved up into the area. We also called in 5 different heavy rescue task force teams to assist us, and also called in the Missouri Task Force 1 out of Columbia. So we put about 400 firefighters on that scene in under 2 hours and started our searches. You have to remember, we lost 2 power substations in the area, which knocked out every bit of electric, including cell towers, communications, electric. We had approximately 150 natural gas leaks from homes, which was a big concern. That's a fire hazard. Without electric, you know, if we did get lucky on one part of this, we had no electric, so we didn't have any gas fires. We had multiple people stuck on elevators around the city with no electric. So we spent time getting 40 some odd people out of different elevators across the city. But just getting in, kudos to the St. Louis Police Department as well, as we coordinated with them immediately. What's the priority? Open up Kings Highway, open up Delmar. So we were going to use those as our primary access points to get in. Set up the command post and did approximately 50 straight hours of search and rescue in buildings, because trying to ascertain, is there somebody in the building? Is there, you know, did everybody make it out? Who's trapped? And with the way these buildings came down, every building, every house that had collapsed had to be delayered, and it had to be done in a way where we don't possibly injure somebody who's underneath the rubble. So it becomes very technical.
Chief, with just a little time left, what can you tell us about the confusion between the City Emergency Management Agency and the St. Louis Fire Department? Who was supposed to press the button? SEMA, which is the acronym. They were at a training session. They call the fire department and say, do you have the siren? And there was confusion there. What can you tell us today?
I would say today, the one we're still looking at and investigating, the report was released today. The statement of do you have the sirens wasn't communicated clearly. You have to understand that the dispatchers were already receiving calls on issues that were coming up. So they're picking up the phone, and as they get a statement from someone, it has to be clear. It has to be relayed definitively. Activate the tornado sirens. That's what we needed to hear. So
we'll talk more about that, because St. Louis Mayor Cara Spencer is here, and the suspended head of SEMA is actually here tonight. Sarah is here, and we may talk to her. Let's move on. Chief, thank you so much. An honor to have you. Gwen Moore is with us. She is a curator at the Missouri Historical Society. And as everyone in here knows, North St. Louis is filled with beautiful, all-brick, historic homes. And it is also filled with residents who have lived there and hung on, who want to live there. But for decades, population and investment have both decreased. Can you tell us about the historic disinvestment in North St. Louis? And I say historic, it feels recent, but it is 50 years or so. But talk to us, Gwen.
Well, I would say more than that. Black communities have historically been neglected. They have historically not received the same sort of resources that other communities have received. I can go all the way back to right after the Civil War, but I know we can't go back that far. But let me say, it's been official government policy to neglect black communities. We can go back to 1933, I'll at least go back that far, when we had the Homeowners Loan Corporation that set up those redlining maps, where all black neighborhoods were redlined, which meant that the government would not insure a mortgage. Even if a middle-class black neighborhood was redlined. Rothstein has said that if even one black person lived in a neighborhood, it was redlined. So this was official government policy. And then I'm just going to go forward to 1975 with the Team 4, the notorious Team 4 that everyone I'm sure knows about. But it was just an updated version of redlining, because Team 4 was a consulting firm hired by the city of St. Louis to update the 1947 Comprehensive City Plan. They came up with the same kind of setup that the federal government had come up with, where they were going to rate neighborhoods. A conservation neighborhood was fine. Don't have to worry about it. Redevelopment, the neighborhood was on the brink, but it could be saved. And then it was the depletion neighborhoods, which meant that very little could be done to help that neighborhood. Now, they never used race, but they didn't have to. It's the way they described the neighborhood: unemployed, elderly, welfare recipients. And they said these neighborhoods, they didn't say don't give these neighborhoods any kind of resources, but they said think about it. Is it worth giving these neighborhoods these kind of resources? And of course the answer was no. Now the city said they never formally adopted Team 4, but they didn't have to. All you have to do is look at North St. Louis. I live in North St. Louis.
And so, what is your level or lack of trust that city leaders in 2025, we're staring at 2026, will take a hard left or hard right and do something different than the history you've just described?
Well, I really can't predict that. Let me just say I'm not necessarily optimistic because it's been neglected for so long. It's been deprived of resources for so long. I think the reason there was so much damage from that tornado is because of those decades and decades of ignoring the Black community, of ignoring North St. Louis, of depriving it of resources, not giving it equal resources. And I think there are larger questions involved here. There's economic inequality and there's racial inequality. And it's still, until we start dealing with those problems, we're always going to have these kind of problems in our community.
Gwen Moore, thank you. Thank you all so much for sharing your stories and your point of view. While many St. Louisans were left in immediate need of shelter, of food, and assistance following the tornado, even more St. Louisans stepped up to help. STL Rebuild is one of the many organizations that emerged after the storm. Calvin Motley shares his story.
My name is Calvin Motley. All my life I've been fixing stuff, whether it was a house, a car, but lately it's been more houses. We started STL Rebuild right after the tornado of May 16th. The tornado hit, and Mark Timmerman said, do you need any help? I was like, no. A couple of days later, he said, well, what about your neighbors? Do your neighbors need some help? I said, well, yeah, nobody else is doing any work, so yeah, and there's a lot of trees and stuff out, so yeah, we need some help. So he said, well, why don't we just raise some money to clean up your block? And I'm like, okay, yeah, let's try that and see how that turns out. And it turned out pretty well so far. The day the tornado hit, I was working on his house. I was at his house and I had no clue of what happened here that Friday. I was numb. When I first saw the destruction of the neighborhood, I was numb. Just coming up here, I did not know what to expect. There were trees, there were power lines, there were cars turned over, stuff on its side. It was very, very bad. I saw people whose roofs, just like the whole roof was sitting in the street, or parts of their roof were sitting in the street, or parts of their houses had collapsed and trees had fallen down. But I was relieved when I got home and I saw it just blew off some of the roof covering. With STL Rebuild, what I would like to accomplish is a better view out my window. This is my neighbor's house. We are going to finish putting this wall here, the chimney, and the rest of the parapet wall. What we've been doing is actually whatever it needs to be done. Some of the houses, the parapet wall, some of it collapsed. A lot of chimneys collapsed. The thing about the cleaning up is that without a sustained effort, it's just going to get back like it was. What we're going to try and do is not just clean up just for now. We want to clean up so that a year from now, it won't be so bad when we have to do something. No matter what, this is a long, extended timeline, and it takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of energy. I get a lot of hope from the support I've received from the GoFundMe, from the people who respond to TikTok. I get a lot of support from all over, so that's what gives me the hope.
Well, Calvin Motley and Mark Timmerman are here in the audience tonight. Thank you both so much for joining us. And Mark, I want to give you a chance to speak as well. He mentioned the long term. Mark, can you talk about how STL Rebuild is prepared for the long haul?
Yes. We've started a TikTok page, and there's about 5,000 people who have been following along. And a few weeks ago, Calvin asked on TikTok for content creator help, and the response, I believe there was over 150 people that just direct messaged and said they want to help their architects, their campaign managers, their builders, their educators. And so there's this huge community, which isn't surprising, of people who care about Calvin, who care about Penrose, care about North St. Louis, and want to see people not just rebuild but thrive in the future, which just has not been happening there.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for being here tonight. So there are recovery activists, as I mentioned, that are with us tonight, including the People's Response and members of the Urban League of Metropolitan St. Louis. So I want to start with Tef Poe, musician, rapper, poet, activist. He is a multi-talented and gifted man, very passionate. Tef, talk to me about this recent editorial, which I just read about today, that claimed Black Lives Matter wasn't part of the recovery. Set the record straight.
I don't know what record I'm supposed to set straight. Post-Dispatch is a historically racist institution. So it's to be expected. They've never really identified themselves as a mechanism of media that was on our side to begin with. So to ask where is Black Lives Matter, I mean, that's oddly hypocritical when they helped gut over 30 years of black leadership in this very exact city. So Black Lives Matter was Tashard Jones, Black Lives Matter was Darlene Green. And I'm not saying that because I blindly agree with the last administration on everything, because I didn't. I went to odds with Tashard Jones about several things. But what I'm saying is, if you want to ask questions, let's ask real questions, right? Like, that's just an oddly insidious thing to write, print, publish, and to stand behind when you know that the country right now is in a position where we have an issue with white nationalism. We have an issue with people, specifically in the Democratic Party, organizing these little coup d'etats against black women in leadership, not just in St. Louis, not just in Missouri, but nationwide. And I think what my generation of people want is, we just want real talk about what's really going on, because we can't cure the problem if we're allowing the Trojan horse to reside amongst us. And the whole time, and the whole time that we're here, we get treated as the activists as if we don't have a sophisticated view on what's going on, as if we're just raging maniacs who want to see the city burn down, as if we're complacent and calling for violence in the city, when all too often when the big mamas need help, the grandmamas need help, the TTs need help, it's me and the people I know that's there for them.
And just to explain for y'all who don't know, TT is an auntie. That's an auntie, okay? Tef, I have so much more for you, but I want to go to Kayla Reed, who is with us, co-founder and executive director of Action St. Louis. So many questions and critiques raised about the city's response or in the minds of many, or the lack thereof. What did you feel was lacking then and now?
A lot. So the tornado happened on Friday afternoon. So we sort of knew when I was an hour away when I got home that the weekend government was not going to respond. So part of when we arrived here the night that the tornado happened and the next morning, we sort of assumed the people's response was going to be a weekend effort to stand in the gap. And that gap continued for weeks and months. And now it's been 90 days and there's still a gap in services reaching the people of North City. And we saw fire trucks and tree trimmers in Forest Park on day one. We saw the mayor in the Central West End shaking hands on day one. What we did not see was prioritization of Zone C, which is this neighborhood, the Penrose neighborhood, the O'Fallon neighborhood, the Fairground neighborhood, Zone B, the Ville and Greaterville. They prioritized the zones A, B, and C, 1, 2, and 3, important, less, and even less. That's how we experience the response. That's how we continue to experience the response. And the people have needs. And I just want to say that the people's response was one effort of many grassroots organizations that deployed against the wishes of this administration. She loudly said, do not self-deploy. And if we had not self-deployed, where would North City be 90 days later?
And Kayla, let me be clear. Let me get some clarity about that. Are you saying that you were told by the administration?
In a press conference, the mayor said, we're asking people not to self-deploy. There was a curfew implemented on the night of, so people were discouraged from trying to figure out how to assist each other. We can call that safety, she's gonna call that safety. But what you discouraged was people doing the human thing. And then what you didn't elevate, right? It took her weeks to even acknowledge the YMCA, that thousands of people were mobilizing to support each other. And beyond this political thing that continues to happen, any city mayor, we've been organizers, this BLM article that come out today, for over a decade, since Ferguson. We have responded to the flood under Tashara. We have responded to the police shootings under every mayor. We have responded to the needs of North City for a decade. We've been here, and instead of being in partnership with us and trying to figure out a pathway forward, there was tension out the gate that needed to be clarified because there was residual energy from an election. And the people whose houses got tore down didn't care who was in that seat. They cared who was going to do something for them, and enough has not been done.
Kayla, thank you. Ohun, I'm gonna come to you, but because of what you just said, we wanna go off script, which I love to do anyway, and give the mayor a chance to respond. Mayor Cara Spencer is here. A press conference, you say don't self-deploy. Why did you say that, and what did you mean?
Well, first of all, I want to lift up the work that so many did right off the bat. But Kayla, our office, my team, the team of the city, was doing our best to support the efforts. Dan Gunther and many others were out on a daily basis trying to help, but that doesn't change the reality that no matter how hard our team in the city was working, it wasn't enough. It was so humbling to walk into an emergency management system that wasn't functioning well, that was breaking down. We knew the sirens hadn't gone off. We knew there were functional, structural problems and deficiencies within the emergency management system. We also knew we didn't have a federal government that was stepping up. The night of the tornado, we were faced with miles of downed electrical lines. We had gawkers from all over the region that were clogging up our streets, preventing our emergency management system, our fire department, and our police officers from checking on families and making sure we were deploying life-saving emergency management. It was so humbling to ask folks, the gawkers, to stay home. It was so enormously humbling that night to ask folks not to clog up the streets and not to put themselves and the community in danger by encountering those downed electrical lines. I don't know what we would have done as a community if the People's Response and many others hadn't stepped up. The work that you all did was truly life-saving and transformed the community. Yes, you all deserve a standing ovation every room you walk into.
Thank you, Mayor.
But I also just want to say, Carol,
Okay.
to the city workers who were out that weekend, who were working 12, 16-hour days, our emergency responders, our refuse department, our city staff that, the assessor's office was out working 12, 16-hour days just to assess buildings to try and get FEMA and the federal response engaged was truly heroic as well. We know it wasn't enough. And we know that our city needs partnerships with organizations like yours, with folks on the ground, with our state reps, with our elected officials, with our alderpersons across the board, with the folks that are doing the work on the ground every day beyond emergencies. And it's our hope that through this work, over the years to come, that those relationships that you all will be open to partnering with us, partnering with the city, and partnering beyond this emergency so that we can rebuild together.
Thank you. Ohun. Ohun is the, founder of For the Culture. Are you open to partnering?
It took you 4 days before you came to this Black hub where these Black people were who needed to hear from their mayor about what was coming, what resources they had and you came for a photo op. You came for an opportunity. You didn't come to hear from the community. So to make it seem like we are always hard to work with, or that because we call you out that we are trying to be a problem, no, we're trying to have a solution. The people that stepped up to do this are not disaster relief organizations. We weren't sent in to do this. We learned because we knew that we had to. I remember after night one, when we were leaving, when we set up in one parking spot and told the community that we will be here, that they can sign in on a volunteer, that we may need some donations, looking out into North City and it being pitch black and nobody was around. No workers were around. After you told people not to self-deploy, people were stranded outside in the darkness, nothing to eat, in the heat. I don't know how you do these press conferences. I don't know how you sit in front of these cameras and really feel good about what you say.
Oh, huh?
I don't
Let me
know.
ask this.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No. It is a judgment statement to say that you came for a photo op. Why did you come that day?
I don't think any photos were taken that day.
We didn't let you.
There were no photos even, I don't know how to respond to that. There were no photos even attempted. That was not the reason we came. We came to bring supplies. We brought flashlights. We brought water. We brought hope, and we brought wanting to work together. And I saw very clearly that there was a working relationship between many members of city staff and the folks that were doing the hard work on the ground. We came to say thank you. I remain grateful and full of gratitude for that work, because it was work the city wasn't equipped to do. It was work that we still are not equipped to do. And we can't do this work in silos. We have to work together. That's very, very clear.
We certainly do hope that this town hall, as all town halls should, that they are revealing for everybody who attends, and that you do walk out of here. Kayla, let me finish. Kayla.
To sit here and say, we hope that you will, as if though we haven't, inside of being blacklisted, shut out, ignored, dismissed, is insulting to a lot of the organizations that have done the work.
And again, I do hope that this conversation tonight is revealing. A town hall should be revealing to everyone in attendance, and that we walk out of here with renewed, whatever that may be, renewed fill in the blank, a renewed sense that I'm on the right path, or a sense that I'm not, a sense that there's somebody in the audience that I didn't know existed that I now need to work with. I hope there's revelation in the room tonight. That's one thing. I have many hopes, but that is one of them. Let me go to Farrakhan, who has many titles. You experienced a tornado firsthand, and when I walked out of the building, the first thing I saw was your truck crushed by debris from the tornado. My understanding is you and your team went out right after the tornado left this area and began to try to rescue people and remove debris. Describe that experience, that afternoon.
First, Ms. Carroll, thank you. I think it's proper for us to, number one, commend all of the children that started school today, and the families that sent them to school in spite of their situations and conditions. To see this morning, to see some of the kids coming off of the bus, going into the school, so innocent, not knowing the adult mess that they're living in or living under, but for them to jump off the bus, be cheerful and be happy and giving hand claps and walking into the school. This morning, that was so precious to me. And I think what's important is that what you see me wearing is what I had on Friday, May 16th. The lights was flickering off and on inside the old Sears building, and I heard a roar. So I went outside and I saw my truck. There was 6 spaces originally from where I parked it, and the building next door to us completely flattened my entire truck. So I went back inside, and by that time, everyone was being rushed to the basement. A few seconds later, I came back outside, and I see Mr. Holmes on the front of the building looking at the glass that's been shattered. And I said, Mr. Holmes, did you see the strip mall across the street have been completely demolished? And we walked right past my truck, didn't say a word. So we rush over there to the strip mall.
People were trapped.
And we're pulling individuals out from under debris with fire sprinklers gushing water down and hot electric on, and I'm stepping in knee-high water, pulling people out, and blood is gushing from their faces, and mothers and people getting their nails done are like, just devastated. And so at the end, Ms. Carl, I went back across the street to the old Sears building, and I called me an Uber. And I went home, I changed clothes, I came back with 2 chainsaws. And with those 2 chainsaws, at that time, probably 6, 7 of my fellow block unit members who are here today, came up there by the time I made it back. And I said, here's what we're going to do, Fire Chief Jenkerson. We're going to go and clear Page. There's a massive tree that's on Page Boulevard sitting right at Walton and sitting right at Euclid, that if we don't get this tree, there's no way that no car can make it down and make it into Lewis Place, Fountain Park, Kingsway East, no way whatsoever. So we went and started clearing trees, Miss Carol, and by that time that we started clearing trees, the most beautiful thing that I saw was people saw us cutting trees, and they said, y'all need some help? Mm-hmm. They said, y'all want me to go get my chainsaw? Y'all need me to go get some extra hands, some gloves, some waters? That moment right there spoke to me how those little children spoke to me this morning. That we in St. Louis, despite of what they say and despite of how they label our community, that we're just a bunch of savages, or we're just a bunch of people that don't care, we're just a bunch of people that's uneducated, we're just a bunch of people that do not value where we live and what we do. To anybody that says that to this day, you are a damn fool.
Thank you, Farrakhan.
A fool, Miss Carol. And I thank you for offering to give me some boots, because you seen me climbing on top of second-story roofs.
In tennis shoes.
In tennis shoes.
Yeah.
See me climbing on top of roofs, pulling pulling brick out. And Ms. Curl, if you don't mind, I just want to highlight, and I won't say her name because she asked me not to make it public, but you know, there was one house that sits right on Natural Bridge, and I think that is Cora, I believe. And she had a bunch of cats, and the cats were just meowing. And they say, there's another cat that's missing. So we heard the cat under the brick. And so we said, let's go save the cat. So we're moving the brick, and we see a leg. We see a body, right? And so we dig out the body, and of course, she didn't make it. But it's that kind of experience that I think that it's important for all of us to grab on to, that life is so precious. We don't care about this back and forth with all of this Republican and Democrat and all of this bureaucracy. We don't care about none of that. We just want to save lives. We just want to step up and do what's right for our people so that our people and our children can see that there are leaders today that care. That's all we want to see, and that's all we want to do. So if there's anybody that's trying to hinder that progress that we as a people is trying to make, get out of our way or get ran over. That's it. That is it. I'm done, Ms. Carroll. I'm done.
Thank you, Farrakhan. And we thank all of you for this discussion. We thank you for your emotion. Do not back away from any emotion that you have. Let's walk through it. Let us absolutely walk through it. Thank you for your honesty. Truly, thank you for your honesty and all the work that you continue to do. Along with homes, many businesses in the St. Louis area are also facing a long road to recovery. Delmar Boulevard, known for its art and food and history, was devastated by the storm. Felice McClendon is executive director of Delmar Main Street. She describes her own experience and how people and businesses are trying to move forward after May 16th.
Hi, my name is Felice McClendon, and I'm the executive director for Delmar Main Street. Eastgate all the way to Taylor is our footprint, which includes 8 neighborhoods, 250 businesses, and 959,000 people. It's specifically in the Delmar Maker District, the part of Delmar that goes from Union to Kings Highway. We had 12 new restaurants that had just opened in the last year. So the impact of the tornado was absolutely devastating. They had spent so much money and time just to have a launch of a building just to have to close. Both personally and professionally, you know, I was impacted. So I was in my car at the intersection of Delmar and Union. This car is coming to me at like 40 miles an hour. I'm honking like crazy, like, oh my God, don't hit me. But the reason why is because trees were swirling around like toothpicks in the sky, and that car was trying to dodge the trees. At that point, tree hits my car, amongst other things. I immediately feel cold and wetness, and so I get down only for one window after another. All of my windows exploded right over my head, just shattering. Trees, debris, bricks, sticks, everything flying, literally hitting me. So my body on this side was filled with glass shards, like you would have splinters. So I looked okay, but the reality was I would get in bed at night and, you know, bloody up my sheets a bit because I was just full of splinters in my actual body that I could not, you know, I mean, I still have battle scars and glass that the storm will forever be with me. They say you can't serve from an empty cup, so a long time ago I learned that it's important to halt. I don't know if you know the acronym, but never let yourself get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And I've been all of the above for like a good 60 plus days. What continues to get me up in the morning is knowing that there's somebody that has needs even greater than my own. We do stop to just celebrate short wins and milestones. So for everyone that is able to open, you know, we come out and surround and celebrate those moments. You know, even when we had the reopening for Steve's Hot Dog and the Fountain, I let this huge, I mean, we probably had close to 1,000 people that came for that one night event. But it was also like, this is one night, and this is really great that everybody bought a hot dog tonight, but it could be crickets tomorrow, you know? So what does it look like to support a small business after that? And so right now, it's really about helping people relocate. And so with St. Louis having as much vacancy as it does have, there's not a small business that should be without a home. So we're working really deep with partners to make sure that businesses can relocate so that they can get to making income as soon as possible. And part of recovery does include preparation for when, not if, this happens again.
Well, Felice is also here tonight, and I saw you that afternoon on Del Mar as I was trying to navigate out of the storm, and I remember thinking, you were outside of your car, is that Felice? And you ran over to my car, window down, we hugged, and I had to navigate out. And we've never talked we've talked, but we have never talked about the emotion that either of us felt that day. How have you helped yourself to heal from such a traumatic experience?
Carol, I was just reaching back to hold my sister's leg behind me, who has a story of her own, because we were talking about the mental health journey of it all. Because someone can look okay, I can still find a nice dress in my closet and, you know, make myself feel a little bit better, but the reality is things have been so badly fractured and broken. That is a mental health issue. And so things like the appearance of buildings that got blown apart, I heard somebody say, it was like that before. It was just this significance of the wind that came. So, you know, in a season, we're in a gym right now, a lot of us are fanning, and it's been my joking but serious, that's my way, when people say, and you can explain the vernacular, where the fans at? Where them fans at? I keep asking people, where the boots at? Because you need your boots. Somebody was, your friends from the lady from Italy said, bring your boots. You gotta have your boots on the ground. And there are so many, I think of Professor Norm White, God rest his soul, but he used to talk about and told a beautiful story about his grandmother's quilt. And he would talk about the quilt, how the patches were different sizes. You could have big Urban League squares, you could have little bitty squares that you never heard of before, but you don't care. When you need covering, you don't say, I want that little square. You want all of the whole covering of all of us. It takes all of us. And so until we get out of our own way with these silos, when you see someone that, I was in a restaurant, my friend took me out to go eat, knowing I wasn't eating. I'm not drinking water, I'm not sleeping. So a friend took me out to go to eat. The waiter dropped the plate and I just bust out crying. Now I look fine, but he was like, are you okay? I was like, apparently not. I'm not okay. A lot of people are not okay. And so many people have the luxury to be in a neighborhood where you weren't impacted, but the residual is still happening all over. And we need not wait until, you know, pay now or pay later. I'm on Del Mar, and by the grace of God, my life was spared. By the grace of God, we were able to work with public and private partners to raise over $100,000 to distribute and get that right back out to the businesses. Thank you for them. But the reality is, I haven't received a federal dollar. You know what I'm saying? I am pouring out of an empty cup. I am about to pass out trying to help other people because help has not showed up yet. And so structurally, I know God saved my life, but he did not save my life so I could go to another meeting to talk about a study. He spared my life so that I could come together, and I very intentionally misspell the word community, and I say come, unity, come, unity, come. It's an invitation, and this is the time. We do not have time to be petty. We do not have time to play politics. I don't care what high school you went to. I don't care who you like, who you don't like, who you voted for, who you didn't vote for. I don't care if you voted at all. At this time, everybody needs to be covered. And that means we will figure out how to work together, or we will continue to lose population, and we won't be relevant, and we won't be here. We won't have a tax base. So the small businesses are the gateway to the neighborhoods, because we provide open doors for revenue and economy. You wipe out the small business, ain't nobody about to move in. So you need to support. It's not an either or, it's a both and. The support that the residents need, those small business owners also need. And what small business is sometimes defined as, you know, a small business association might say a small business is 100 employees, make $1 million a year. That's not the kind of small business I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody who can't afford to pay anybody to come in. I'm talking about the kind of small, and they are representing households. So somebody like Dallas has been all over the news. If she employed 30, 40 people, that's 30, 40 households with 2, 4, 5 people in the home. Multiple hundreds of people, just that one business. So it is very important to keep those small businesses in the overarching plan, which is both a short-term plan and a long-term plan.
Many words being shared tonight. But God did not save me to go to another meeting as one that I'm going to stitch on something. I like that. I like that a lot. Felice, thank you very much for all the work that you continue to do. Joining us tonight are some St. Louis and Missouri leaders, including St. Louis Mayor Cara Spencer. We have already spoken to her, and Missouri Representative Wesley Bell. We reached out to other U.S. representatives and senators as well from Missouri, but they could not be here tonight. So we're going to start with who we do have, and we thank them again for being here. Congressman Wesley Bell, I do want to start with you, and we'll get back to the mayor as well, but talk to us about what you can do from a congressional seat when the Democrats are not in power in any chamber, and Missouri is led by Republicans on the state level. What can you possibly do to help North St. Louis?
You know, I remember when the biggest problems we had in 2025 were sinkholes, and that seems so long ago, doesn't it? I remember in March 14th, when the storms hit in North County, I'm thinking, man, sinkholes, tornadoes, it cannot get any worse. Until May came around, and we saw what literally looked like a war zone in our city. And I don't think that people understand the degree of devastation, certainly outside of this region, that the storms had. And I talked to people around the country. A lot of people didn't even know. They just thought a storm hit us. And so my approach has always been, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna do my job and represent the people of this district, period. I don't care if you supported me, didn't support me. If you're doing the work, you're gonna have my support, period. And so when we look at how we move forward, I gotta let everybody know, the people in this room, the people in this region, that's all we got. People around the country are not looking at and inquiring, oh man, are you guys all right in St. Louis? Most people don't even know. And so when we look at the organizations on the ground, I don't care if governmental, grassroots, we gotta come together, because nobody else is coming to save us.
Thank you, thank you. Mayor, I want to go back to Mayor Spencer, because Kayla mentioned that, and a lot of us saw this, that the chainsaws, the trucks were out in Forest Park right away, and Forest Park is a multi-million-dollar foundation. They run their own, take care of that space themselves, but how do you respond to the notion that the city did not get out and start clearing, and it was people with their own chainsaw like Farrakhan? How do you explain that and help us to understand that?
Well, It's both. I'm so proud of Casey Milberg out of my office, who put together the emergency declaration within hours. And we pulled in all city departments that night and made it very clear that we lifted all restrictions, and we wanted each and every city worker from every single department out working as many hours overtime as we could possibly muster. And our city workforce is only about 66%. We have about 30% vacancy, but the city workers we have, I can tell you, were working their tails off. Our refuse workers were showing up every day at 5 a.m. to go out and do work outside of the refuse department. We activated every single contract, standing contract, and maximized them all in the days to follow. Our forestry clearance, we had a lot of contractors out there going through every neighborhood. We really empowered our city department leads to really direct where that went through. The zones we established a couple months in to make sure we were or at least a month in, to make sure that we were trying to triangulate all those things. But our city workforce really worked as hard as they possibly can, and it is also not nearly enough. Sitting down with FEMA, our state emergency management system, we know that the debris removal is hundreds of millions of dollars. Hundreds of millions. We're talking over $500, $600, $700 million to do the work we need to do just to get the debris out of our communities. And that is why we are leaning in. I have to say, Congressman Bell, your work, not only to push for getting FEMA here, while it is not making people whole, we know that. They have still supplied over $30 million direct aid to get folks resettled. We know that's not nearly enough. When you're talking about $700 million just to get debris out, that doesn't even begin to start to rebuild.
And Mayor, let me ask you too about that. We know you're telling us it's expensive. Mm-hmm. It has started, correct? And respond to the feeling people had, may not be factual, please help us.
Look, the feelings that people have.
That debris removal didn't start fast enough.
The feelings people have are rooted in reality. We know that the debris removal has not happened fast enough. We know that. We don't have the resources, we don't have the manpower within city government to do that, Carol. It is so humbling to look at our forestry department after pulling weeks and weeks of 16-hour days and say it's not good enough, guys. They know that they are already underpaid, they are already understaffed, and they live in our community. And they worked so hard, and it's still not enough.
Can we go to yet another tough topic, and that is, as I mentioned to the chief, the tornado siren, that report at the time of this taping on the 18th of August came out today, and I think you said in a statement that it was human failure. You said the city was ill-equipped to handle the immediate aftermath. Ill-equipped does not sound very positive from the mayor of a city.
Our emergency management system, our SEMA, our office, has been understaffed and under-resourced for many years. There were also a cascading event of human failures that took place. As the chief mentioned, the directive to the fire department wasn't clear. Even if it had been clear, the button they had was malfunctioning. Sirens across the city weren't working well or working at all. There were failures throughout the system, and it really points to not having decades. I mean, this didn't happen over the course of a couple months or years. This was a decades of disinvestment in an emergency management system. We're lucky now to have that report, to be able to have a roadmap to really address and fix the issues. And as mayor, I'm going to say the buck stops here. The buck stops with me. There were failures across the board, and it is my responsibility and my pledge to fix them. And that's what we're going to do moving forward. But it is clear that it wasn't just a matter of failing to push the button. We had an emergency operating procedure that hadn't been updated since 2003. Our team had, when the tornado hit and we entered the emergency management office, it was clear that there was not an operating procedure or an operating model that was working. It was a member of the mayor's office who was brought here by Bloomberg who picked up and held the 12-hour meetings on behalf of the city to organize this system to get us going in the right direction. And Crizia Lopez did a phenomenal job setting that in motion. But the reality is there were failures, a cascading of failures across the board. And the feelings people have that the city wasn't doing enough are absolutely rooted in reality. I know that, and it is humbling, and I also know our workforce was truly doing the best that they could do at the time. We know that cities right now in this national environment the emergency systems are being defunded. FEMA, when it showed up finally, the rules were changing underneath their feet on a daily basis. The folks who were here helping us, who were doing a tremendous job trying to get people signed up, it wasn't their fault. They were trying to help, but still the federal rules were changing while they were here, whether or not they could knock doors and get people signed up. Those rules changed while they were here, while we were relying on the folks on the national level to help us. Our country is faced with so many major questions, one of which is, are we going to shove emergency management entirely on cities and states? Are we equipped as a city to even begin to shoulder that? And if this president and this administration at the national level is going to start burdening cities and states with that, we have to be at least aware of that so we can start to prepare. We were so underprepared for a FEMA that was pulling out the rug, not only just out underneath us, but underneath its own workforce, its own workers who were dedicated professionals who chose careers in emergency management, who truly, those of you who interacted with FEMA, for the most part, we heard overwhelmingly positive reviews of the folks on the ground who were working to get folks signed up. They were working so hard and with such heart, and still the federal government was changing the rules of their own jobs as they were here. It was truly a grueling experience. The feelings of inadequacy, of an inadequate response on the city, state, and federal level are rooted in true lived experience. And we know that. And it is our job as a city, as the Congressman pointed out, we are here and we are going to do our best to fill in the gaps. And we are your neighbors, and this is our community, and we are going to do the best that we can to do that.
I do want to go to Julian, who is sitting next to you. Julian Nicks is the long title, Chief Recovery and Neighborhood Transformation Officer for the City of St. Louis, a newly created position. And because it's new, we don't know what you do, Julian. So tell us what your goals are, what your objectives are in this office.
Yeah, so there's a couple. I think one of them, and I think the group hit it well, is actually thinking about how does the city start to rebuild and restore after this strong period, and how do we actually engage broader community in setting the vision of what that looks like. So I think one of them is actually trying to set a community-centric vision for where we go from here. And I think the group hit it well, is that we're talking about decades of disinvestment. So we're not just talking about a tornado that hit an area, we're talking about a tornado that hit as a disaster well after multiple disasters, which makes the trauma and difficulty of this recovery much more difficult. So I think one of them is figuring out where do we go from here and charting a path. I think Mayor Spencer, when she created the recovery office, there was two goals. One, we recognize that this rebuild effort and this recovery effort is going to take well beyond just the immediate. We recognize that we still have to run the rest of the city, and we have to stay focused on this core topic. So one was, we wanted people, including my office, the people in my office, to hold what the residents are holding, that wake up every day thinking about how we recover. And so when we think about the different function sets within that, there's a lot of different areas within the city that we're organizing and bringing cross-city departments, as well as working with other nonprofit partners to figure out. One of them is, how do we support residents through this continued transition? This is not as people mentioned, right now it's the immediate response. Long term, there's so much longer needs that are going to be that people are going to have as we look at this recovery effort. So how do we support and create that broader ecosystem is the core goal. How do we remove the debris out of the neighborhood and reinvest in the infrastructure like sidewalks and tree canopy long term? How do we restore and rebuild housing? We lost a large amount of housing stock from that reinvestment. That's going to take a while. So that's one of the core areas of focus. And then how do we also accelerate the development process? We know from a city that the process to build in the city has already been cumbersome. We know developers have told us that that's made it difficult to invest. And when you add in the disinvestment, when you add in the redlining that has undervalued these properties, borrowing against land value, having an insurance policy to pay out, don't exist. So how do we start to accelerate processes to help in this effort? And then the last, and I think they hit on it well too, is how do we help the small business and nonprofits recover in this? And so it's really holding all 5 of those core facets and figuring out how we move forward from here.
Julian, do you have a stated objective to hold the line on gentrification?
So we have...
And we want to be clear. I said this to someone today. And they said to me that there may be African Americans who want to own a Starbucks. There may be African Americans who want to establish a beautiful new structure, whether it's a home or a business. But the core meaning of gentrification is poor black people, poor people are moved out, and wealthy developers move in. That's the gentrification I am talking about. And so where does the office fall in that?
Yeah, and I think Mayor Spencer said this at the very beginning. Our goal is to keep people in their neighborhoods and try to help them restore and rebuild. That is a top and priority objective that was stated by Mayor Spencer very early into the tornado and remains a guiding principle tied to the Recovery Office.
All right, we're on tape. Let me go to 14th Ward Alderman Rasheen Aldridge, who represents Jeff Vanderloo, among other areas. What are you hearing from constituents? What are they telling you?
I think right now, first before I start, Ms. Carroll, before I start, I would be remiss as, I think, an alderman and somebody who in the legislative branch seen firsthand, and I think, people like action and for the culture. It is true, when city government did not have a plan on that day one, I still think city government is still trying to figure out how do we move forward. The people were there. The community was there. They stepped up. I remember day 2 coming to the O'Fallon Rec Center, and Kayla was deploying people like she do. Ohun was deploying people. Tef was deploying people, saying, go into the neighborhoods and clean up and just support the community. And the city could not be, honestly, in this space of trying to figure out what is the next steps if it was not for community, if it was not also for our city workers. But the community was the ones who instantly, with no question asked, said, we must deploy within minutes of this storm. And we would not be in this position of, I think, even talking about recovery if it was not for the community. And I just want to thank community members and the organizations for doing the work. But I think the question right now that I continue to hear, and I'm sure plenty of my colleagues, and I don't want to remiss, Alderman from the 10th Ward, Alderman from the 11th Ward, Lord Keys, Alderman from the 12th Ward, Sharon Tyus, Alderman Michael Browning from the 9th Ward, who was devastated by this storm. Residents are still asking, when can we rebuild? When are we going to see, fully the Rams dollars that this Board of Aldermen came together? And I will say I am proud of my colleagues. We do fight at the board if you watch the Board of Aldermen, but during this time, it was actually nice to see us all come together and pass $30 million. And I'll be real, at some point we probably need to open up Pandora's box and figure out more of that money getting out the door, because residents want to know what is next, and why FEMA has been a help, why our congregation on the federal level has been a help. Honestly, only way we're going to be able to save the areas that have been impacted by this tornado is we're going to have to help ourselves. We cannot wait on the federal government. We can't wait on the state that has passed, I think, $100 million that we're still waiting to see. We're going to have to come together. We're going to have to open up more of those funds from the Rams dollars. We're going to have to open up and working with the community. But residents want to know what is next? Because I think, like most of us at the Board of Aldermen, and even as Julian said, people do want to stay in St. Louis. I look across the aisle and I see my sister who came back from the trip in France or Italy, but they want to stay here. They want to continue to rebuild here. But the reality is, what this tornado did is it only ripped a Band-Aid back from an area that has already been disinvested, right? An area that has already been redlined, an area that has already been slowly starting to gentrify, even in my ward when you look at the NGA area, right? An area that has already not received the adequate dollars to be able to be insured by insurance companies that are now under-insuring them and will not even give them the money to be able to rebuild. And now the question I think a lot of residents is asking city government leaders, and I'll be the first to say it's going to take all of us because we don't have the answers completely. But you have a lot of older people that I sit next to, that I serve with, that are ready to stand up, ready to fight to figure out how do we rebuild our North St. Louis? How do we make sure that Big Mama and TT that have had these homes for generations have the ability to be able to stay in their homes so that it does not get gentrified? Because we know there's a lot of sharks and a lot of predators out there that are looking at these beautiful brick homes in North St. Louis and saying, we will buy you out.
Right.
And we can't allow that to happen.
I do want to say, and thank you so much, Representative Aldridge, that we got a lot of questions from people who registered, and our intention at 9PPS is to give those questions to all of the elected officials and to share them back to those of you who asked those questions. And I should have said at the beginning that we would not be able to get to all of the topics and all of the issues that we are facing, but we're going to get to as many of them as we can. And joining us now is a sociology professor at St. Louis University, Dr. Ness Sandoval. Thank you so much for being here. I know of two families, one is a renter and one is a homeowner, who've already moved out of the city. Do they come back? They are not sure, even if they can. Linda, our earlier guest, says she intends to rebuild. Can you estimate for us the damage that the tornado has done, not just physically, but to the St. Louis population?
Absolutely. So what we know is about 14 neighborhoods were impacted, census tracts were impacted by the tornado. In those census tracts, there are about 28,000 residents. And so we know a lot of things that I've talked about. Natural disasters do not change patterns, they just accelerate patterns that are already in place. And so there was already demographic loss happening. And so what will happen is we will see an acceleration of demographic loss. And it's going to be in particular cohorts of households, particularly families with children. So in those 14 census tracts, there are 2,500 households with children. So we're going to see a loss. But when you lose a household with children, you don't lose one person. You lose 4 to 7 to 8 people. And so the city's doing a very good job at building homes for non-family households, but that's typically 1, 2 people. The reason why the population is declining in the city is that it's losing its families with children. It's losing its children. And so the city has to make families with children a priority. And so when it rebuilds these neighborhoods, families and children have to be at the core of the foundation of building these neighborhoods up again. It is a difficult challenge, because when families leave, especially children under 5, they're not going to come back into the city, because when you study families who leave with children, they want stability, they want consistency, and so once they develop roots out in the suburbs, it's going to be very difficult to convince those families to come back in. Families with older children want to stay in the city because their children are already invested in the schools, they're invested in friendship, social capital, and so they are in the city trying to find new neighborhoods. The challenge for the city is how many of those 2,500 households with children actually leave. And so we say this is a demographic shock. And so we have an estimate of the demographic shock of 3,500 residents that will leave. But then there's the aftershock, and many people have talked about the aftershock. And the aftershock is about the perception, about hopelessness, that the city will not be rebuilt. And if those aftershocks are large, then the 3,500 I'm talking about probably is going to be closer to 7,000 people who leave. And so we don't know what the aftershock is, but the aftershock we have pretty good data coming out every 6 months or so. The city has to manage those aftershocks and show hope that these neighborhoods will be rebuilt, and they'll be built with families with children. And then the other part is that there are a lot of seniors, so these are the elders, the wisdom, the people who provide the history. They're going to get impacted. If they don't come back, then the neighborhoods themselves may gentrify, right? So you have to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to hold back. And there are lots of case studies throughout the United States that look at natural disasters and movement in and out. The challenge for the city, though, is when these young families leave, they're probably not going to come back.
And does it matter quickly, those young families, whether they're homeowners or renters? Is it more likely if they're a homeowner that
if they cannot find a house, so that you're going to have short-term home if they can't find home,
Right.
and if they don't have insurance. So you're going to get a short-term demographic shock. The question will be the long-term, and the challenge for the city is there's not a surplus of families in the suburbs with children, because our region has fewer families with children today than we did in 2010. And so the good thing about the city is every year about 10,000 households move into the city from around the country. Every year, about 10,000. So every year there's new life coming to the city. The city has to capture that momentum and keep those families with children in the city as they look for the American dream in the city.
I always say, when talking about population loss, that we focus on St. Louis City's population loss, but we are a region, and the region is not growing.
Yes.
As much as I love St. Charles, as much as I love St. Peter's, this region isn't growing. So it's not just that the city of St. Louis might be losing population, we as a region are.
And I've made this point before, the region will not grow until St. Louis City starts to grow again. And so the region has—
Go to Jeff City, Ness.
The region has a responsibility to respond to tornado if they want to see the city grow. If they want growth in the suburbs, St. Louis City has to start experiencing growth. If St. Louis City continues to decline, St. Charles, Chesterfield will see the population decline. It's that simple.
Okay. To my producers, I love you. I'm so sorry. Congressman Bell, Mayor Spencer, have elected officials from the region or from other parts of the country reached out to you to say we want to help St. Louis recover from the tornado? Mayor Spencer, you're saying yes?
I can say yes, and I think regional leaders recognize exactly what Dr. Sandoval's saying, that we have stagnated as a region, lost a little bit of population, but the city has been at a precipitous loss for the last 5 years. In fact, we have been losing population faster than almost anywhere in the United States. It's not a small amount of loss here in the city, and I agree with you, Carol, that if we are going to grow as a region, we have to grow here as a city. Ness, you're absolutely right. We have recognized that as a state, I would say, finally, but it took population loss in St. Louis County recently in the last census to finally be that wake-up call, I think, for the region to say, hey, this isn't just a problem for the city.
Right.
And frankly, the city can't do this alone. So that population loss that has been happening in the city of St. Louis, this isn't alone the fault of the city, the past leadership, or anybody who, this is a regional problem. We've been operating in silos for my lifetime, the lifetimes of almost all of us in this room. And until we start to break those down, and I finally see the East-West Gateway coming together on issues like homelessness, on issues that affect all of us, crime, those sorts of things, when we start to break down those silos and address the inequities in our region. And I think, quite honestly, that is one of the biggest issues holding us back, the inequities and the disinvestment in North St. Louis. So the tornado is our opportunity to turn that around, to do right by our community, to build those homes that can house families, can repopulate St. Louis public schools, can be the future that turns around the city, the region, and turns that population loss into a population growth model that doesn't gentrify our city, but provides growth opportunities, stabilization, and really provides a path for home ownership for all the folks who lived here, have lived here, not just in the tornado, but through the decades and through the past wrongs that have occurred in our community that we can right through these investments.
All right, Congressman Bell, I'm being told that I have to move on, but just one question we have a lot of questions from the audience members, but I definitely wanted to get in Reverend Dr. Dietrich Wise-Baker, who is the pastor at Centennial Christian Church, where one of the deceased was found, longtime church member, and she is here. Well, there you are, my dear.
Yeah, I mean, our church is in Fountain Park, right on the Central West End corridor. The Sharks have been there for the last, decade, and with what has happened, we know the Sharks are coming, and so we want to know, what is the community going to do to make sure that the people in Fountain Park, but also in North City, right, we're all the same, are protected from what is about to happen and what is happening and what has been happening in our community.
That's a question for the mayor and newly appointed Julian in his office. We did talk about that, Julian.
Yeah, and I think the main aspect is we have to figure out how we help the families that are there stay, and that's kind of what we're focusing on. And I think the first step is making sure that we know the process for people restoring and rebuilding their houses isn't going to happen overnight, and winter's coming. So the first focus is intermediate housing, and ideally within the city. And then the second is figuring out how we help support families in the rebuild efforts.
What a night. What a conversation. There is so much more to be said and so much more work to be done. We at 9PBS want to thank you so much for coming out, to our activists, to those who experienced it firsthand and are continuing to heal, to those helping business owners, to our elected officials. We thank you all for coming this evening. The questions that were asked, that were given to us prior to, will be given to our elected officials so that they can answer those. Thank you for joining us for 9PBS's Tornado Town Hall, your voice, our future. I'm Carol Daniel. Have a great night.
This program is funded in part by the following: